Hello, and welcome to the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Hawley, holistic sleep coach, lactation consultant, peaceful parenting educator, and mom. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting sleep info, frustrated with sleep information that just plain felt wrong, or searched desperately for a truly gentle and responsive sleep approach, then you are in the right place. In each episode, we'll be answering your most pressing baby and toddler sleep questions, busting those sleep myths, and helping you understand truly developmental, biologically normal baby and toddler sleep, plus encouraging you to trust your intuition along the way. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. This week, we are talking about grandparents and grandparent communication and grandparent involvement, and I am so excited for this topic and to have Sheena Hill with us today, who is my expert. Sheena's been on the podcast before. She's a parenting coach and has a book coming out on this topic, which is why this topic at this time, though this has been a topic I've been wanting to do a podcast on for a while. So Sheena, welcome. Thank you for being here and chatting with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim. It's great to be here with you.
Awesome. So grandparents, they can be so wonderful and so helpful, and also there can be so much tension, right, between parents trying to figure out what the heck they're doing and grandparents trying to figure out what the heck they're doing in that role. And I don't know, I know what I see and I know what I've experienced as a new parent. And I know that you have seen and experienced your own things, but let's just talk about a little bit about that. Everyone's trying to find their role and some of the miscommunications and good intentions, but maybe poor impact that can come out of that.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you said everyone's trying to find their role, Kim, because I think that's the crux of the challenge. Parenting and child rearing has changed so much since we were being parented, right? Kind of the millennial generation who are currently parenting actively. Our parenting is very different from our parents' parenting in a lot of ways, in some really foundational ways, in terms of emotional intelligence, in terms of identity and autonomy, in terms of discipline. You know, there are so many foundational things that our generation of parents is intentionally doing differently. So it's not just that it's different, it's that it's a choice. And this, really has created a large generational divide between parents and grandparents, because I think that role piece is really at play. I speculate that grandparents aren't able to kind of assume their role as experts because they're not familiar with the modern techniques, which is why I wrote the book, because I really do feel that part of the tension, right? There's many layers, but a core part of the tension is that historically, when parents had children, they would look to grandparents not just for logistical support, can you watch the children? Can you help me learn how to change a diaper? Can you be here in the middle of the night when I have a newborn? But also that wisdom and psychological support. How do I get my baby to go to sleep? How do I get my children to stop fighting? How do I discipline when something is going wrong? And historically, a lot of parents reached out to their parents and in-laws for that information. And now there's a bit of a shift there because our parents would do things so differently than we would do. And so we're reaching out to different sources, right? Most millennial professionals are getting their parenting support online from parenting books, from parenting professionals like you and I. And so there's a real sense of, I think, from grandparents, what is my role? I'm not the wise expert who can tell you, we'll just put cereal in the bottle. We'll just, do this, because parents don't want that. advice that's not aligned with their values. It's not aligned with what they're already doing or how they want to parent. And so that creates a bit of a disconnect. So the book was really designed to help bridge that gap, specifically by talking about what has changed in parenting in terms of some of those key concepts and some specific tools that we use as relationally based parents that grandparents can adopt,
Mm-hmm.
and how, really seeing some of those tools in action, so that grandparents can feel more confident knowing what parents need, knowing what children need, particularly children with differently wired brains. It's not the focus of the book, but it is something that I mention many times.
I
um,
mean, it's those parents who often feel judged the most, right? And who struggle the most to get tools working for them. And then if you don't feel like your mom has your back, right? Like, or understands your experience, that's just like a whole nother layer when you have neurodivergent or like kind of extra kiddos.
Absolutely. I mean, the skill that, we talk to parents about is finding the why behind the behavior. And so essentially, I'm asking grandparents to do the same thing. Find the why behind these different parenting behaviors so that you can better understand what's being asked of you, so that you can provide more confident support, so that you can know what to do, so you can be a source of that wisdom and high quality support. And my goal is that it helps parents as well, right? Obviously, it was written for grandparents, but my goal is that it helps parents to have those conversations, to
Yes.
broach those topics, to feel like they have a resource to use to talk to their grandparents about those topics. Because I feel like there's also a gap there.
Yes. And I was actually about to say, like, knowing that you want to parent in a responsive way and having the language to explain that to your parents in a way that you're not attacking the way that they parented you. You're not criticizing them. You simply are bringing them in and sort of up to date. That is a skill in of itself. And like, I think about just my own early parenting experience, right? So my mom, I would say, was a pretty responsive parent, right? If we
Mm.
throw back to like, I mean, the 80s and 90s, right? Version of that. So like more like attachment parenting, international kind of
Hmm.
zone. Like them, that was the source back then. But even talking with her, like there's a lot of difference between the way we understood stuff then and the way we understood stuff now. And there's a lot of common threads, but there's also different nuance, right?
Hmm.
And I'm lucky because I have a really good relationship with my mom. And I could just be like, hey, mom, this is what they know now. Like, this is what they know now from neuroscience. This is what they know. And, from I don't know, stress or
Hmm.
neurodivergent research or whatever, ADHD, all that kind of stuff. And she's like, oh, interesting. And she'll kind of take that on board. But like
Wow.
my mother-in-law did not parent her kiddos that way. But I'm also super spoiled because she just always took it as, oh, you guys are going to do your thing. I did my thing and was really, really curious. So like I got really
Mhm.
spoiled. Like I remember like back in the day, right? Posting on Facebook, like when I was learning how to parent a toddler for the first time, which was like the really, really hard thing for me
Sure.
with my ADHD child. And we didn't know it was ADHD at the time. And she just read all these articles I would post, and they'd be like, "Hey, Kim, I read that article about setting limits. It's so interesting. I never thought about it that way." And I'm like, it wasn't until later that I realized just quite how spoiled I was. Like, oh my gosh, like in most grandparents are not open and eager to receive that information. So willingly. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think they really do want to be able to show up in the way that like my mother-in-law and my mom have. And so I'm like, I'm so spoiled. And I'm like, oh my God, what would I have done if I wasn't so spoiled? I would have no idea how to have those conversations.
It's tricky for sure. And you're right. It's really tough to for a lot of parents to know how to explain what they are trying to do or what they want to do. And even if they can explain it or send articles, and sometimes grandparents want to read the articles and sometimes they don't.
Hmm.
But even when they provide those resources, sometimes in the heat of the moment, I think it's still hard for parents to explain what they're doing or maybe set boundaries or ask for help or do some of those things, right? Outside of the heat of the moment, there may be a conversation. Hey, that's not why we do things. Here's what to do instead. But there's still a shift, in the heat of the moment where maybe the grandparents are wanting to be helpful. There's an example that I use in the book where the parents are trying to get the children to leave grandparents' house to go home, and the children are really amped up. And so they're having a hard time cooperating. And the grandparent comes into the room with harshness, right? They come in and say, why are you talking to your parents like that? You should be listening. This is not respectful. And they think that they're helping. They're trying to help, but they're not helping at all. Everybody's more dysregulated in that situation. So the goal is to make it more accessible for families to have these conversations. Some of the worksheets are reflection based, but some of the worksheets are planners, how planning about safety needs for children between parents and grandparents, planning for discipline needs between parents and grandparents, planning for just general needs. And so whether you use that every day when you take your, children to your grandparents or to their grandparents, or whether you use it occasionally, I'm hoping that it helps to provide some of the, just kind of an easy in to have some of those conversations about what the expectations are and about what the child needs, and to have these conversations about parenting. So that's why I have a lot of examples. That's why I have, different ways to approach the information in the book so that parents can maybe, talk about it with grandparents. Maybe grandparents will read it and say, hey, I don't understand why it says to do this. Do you want to talk about it with me? My main goal in writing the book, Kim, truly, it's something that I was focused on every single day. And I, made it really clear to my publisher when we started the process. It was high priority to me that the book is really gentle and has zero shame, shame, so that it's as accessible as possible for those grandparents who do want the information, but also find that it is uncomfortable. Their children are doing things that are so different than how they parented. And there is this fear. Why are they doing something different? Does it mean I hurt them? Does it mean they don't love me? Does it mean, all of these things that as parents, we understand, when our child hits their sibling, we might think, oh my gosh, are they going to turn out to be something violent, right? Because that's just how our brain works when we are parenting.
Yeah.
So the goal of the book is to give this information without causing any harm and acknowledging that there are going to be challenging things. There are going to be ways and tools that are different. And so I've put in specific worksheets and reflection points and pause points throughout the book. Actually, at the end of every single section, there's a reflection worksheet that helps grandparents process their feelings about what they've just read. It helps them reflect on the things they might agree with about what they read, the things they don't agree with, the questions they still have, so that they can go to their children or in-laws and say, okay, I read this section and here are the questions I still have, or here are the ways that this made me feel. And if they don't have the relationship that they can talk to their children or in-laws about that, there is, encouragement to talk to parenting professionals, to talk to somebody who can help them through that process. And that's also why I included a tremendous amount of references. Every change that I mention in the book has a reference. Sometimes there's multiple references because I want them to have access to the research so that they can have further learning. There's a large glossary. There are ways that grandparents can access this information in a variety of capacities.
I love that because I just like you reflect backwards and it's like, oh my God, the research is just like there's been so much like really transformative research in the last few decades as we
Yes.
understand stress, as we understand, formative brain development, as we understand neurodiversity, as we understand sensory needs, as we understand all the things, right?
Yes.
Um, as we understand relationships with food, as we understand sleep, like all the things. And it's just like, I don't know, like, just, I can imagine how it could make a grandparent feel really defensive and really judged, just like, grandparents offering unsolicited advice from the 1980s
Mm,
can make a parent, in our generation feel really judged and
yeah.
really defensive. And there's like that on both sides. But when we kind of see like y'all were doing the best you could with the information you had in a very different time, and look at what the research has shown us, right? Like look at how much has come out and changed. Like to me, that's comforting. It's like we're not just reacting to the way you parented us. We are literally seeing our depth of knowledge just grow and trying to incorporate that
Hmm.
into the way that we parent.
That's such a beautiful way to look at it, Kim, that it's not just a reaction. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is, right? Like, but a lot of times it's not that simple. And even when
Right.
it is, I mean, I still think, they were doing the best they could, just like your parents. I'm like,
Absolutely.
what are my kids gonna turn out and be like, Mom, that was a terrible way to parent. Well, like, we're all doing the best that we can. No one's
Yes,
perfect. Like we're all
that's
going to
right.
fumble like things. And I just love that like compassionate approach, like looking back to our parents, but also just that like we're all gonna mess things up. We're not robots. We are humans with our own demands and our own stresses. And
Exactly.
yeah.
Do you know, it's so funny because I think, my oldest is 21. She's actually going to be 22 soon. I mean, she's a full
Gosh.
adult person.
Wow.
She's
You have
getting
like a
ready to
whole adult
graduate.
person.
Yes, exactly. She's
Oh
getting
my
ready to
gosh,
graduate
Sheena.
college. She works for City Hall in Chicago. I mean, she's
Oh,
really
that's
just
so amazing.
making her life amazing. And when she first went to college, I'm driving her out to school and we were having lots of bonding time on our road trip and heart-to-heart conversations. And one of the conversations we had was that she kind of said, "Here are the things about growing up that I felt, I feel now that I needed that I didn't get." And so as a parent, I've been on the receiving end. Now, she's not a parent yet, but I've been on the receiving end of that specific feedback, right? To say,
Hmm.
"Ooh, you're right. I thought I did my best, but I could see that there were blind spots. I could see that there were pieces where I thought you needed X and really you needed C." And
Hmm.
I dropped the ball there. I missed it, and that's okay. She we still have a great relationship. We still love each other. We're still very close. She's still amazing in the world.
Hmm.
So I feel like that gives me, even though again, I'm not quite a grandparent yet, it does give me a sense of that experience on the receiving end
Yeah.
that we know we aren't going to be perfect parents. And, I think for millennial parents, that's part of our stress. We wish we could be perfect parents. We really wish that we could just make this parenting thing, so easy. But that it's a humbling experience to know that no matter how we parent, like you said, we're humans and there are going to be places where we miss the mark. And that's okay. We don't have to be perfect at this job to do a good job. And that's true for parents, that's true for grandparents. So
Hmm.
the book definitely is focused on creating that relational safety within families. And that's something I'm super passionate about. So I'm really excited to share it. And I hope that it helps a lot of families.
I just love the way you just phrased that there, right? That we're creating that relational safety between the different generations to discuss these topics because, like, I mean, that's kind of the heart of the whole parenting approach, right? Like is that it's relational, is that we're concerned and aware of relational safety in the ways that we choose to parent and
Hmm.
react and set limits and all that kind of stuff. And it's like that is often a piece that's missing from sort of older generation parenting that was more about compliance.
Hmm.
And like hold trying to create that space and hold that space for us to talk to our own parents. I don't know. I really like looking at it that way where it's like, okay, we're trying to create that relational safety so we can discuss these topics that are big, right? Like they shape your feelings of safety around sleep. They shape your feelings of safety and around food. They shape how
Hmm.
move the world. I'm just thinking like the whole like you have to clean your plate totally before you leave the table kind of BS versus like that's not a healthy dynamic to have with food now, right? And like we
Absolutely.
know that, and the research is really clear, but that is what a lot of people were raised, like our parents were raised with. And like you think about like sleep and safety and nervous system and all of that, and that's not what the 80s were all about with Ferber, like, or arguably mainstream sleep advice now, but it's just that safety and nervous system and relationship piece. It's so
Yes.
important, right? And so important that we extend that backwards or whatever the right word would be to our own parents.
Yes, I think the way that most of us were raised, our parents didn't particularly care about the why, right? They didn't care why we didn't want to eat the dinner, just eat it. This is the dinner I made.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't care about why we might be having trouble sleeping or why we might be struggling with our emotions, because behavior was seen as an outward thing. And when it's a surface level thing, it's easy to assume it's willful, it's malicious, it's intentional. And so yeah, it's a huge shift. It's not just different tools. It's a completely different mindset about behavior, which is my
Mm-hmm.
jam, Kim, right? I've been
Yes.
talking about moving away from behaviorism for so long now, which is fun. It's fun to be like, wow, I've really dedicated my life to this.
But you're right, it's such a huge shift, right? As opposed to the behavior being the whole thing. Now it's like, behavior is the symptom or the expression, or I don't know what the right term is there. It's not really quite coming to me. But,
Yeah.
like what's going on beneath that behavior? Why is that behavior occurring? What is it telling us? And you're right, that is such a huge shift that there wasn't scaffolding for our parents to think about things in that way. And so you're right, it's not just the tools. It's like that whole just shift in the way that we're seeing and interpreting the way that our kids are acting.
Yes.
I hadn't really actually thought about it that way, even though, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm with you on the behaviorism, but like,
Yes.
I just hadn't really thought about that generational gap sort of in that exact way. So
Hmm.
it's big shifting stuff we're asking grandparents to do. Particularly, I mean, I just think about, it's one thing to kind of scaffold your kid through a grandparent visit they don't see very often, but like it's another thing when those grandparents want to and you want them to be like actively involved in your kid's life and how that kind of raises the stakes that we are on the same page, more or less.
Yes. Well, and I think level of involvement is important because parents really need the support. That's the thing we were told, we're going to get the village, and grandparents were told they get to be the experts, the wise ones, and we were told we get the village, and nobody's getting what they were told. So that's very
Yes. Yes.
interesting. Um so I mean, that's part of what prompted me to write the book and even have the idea. Kim, I had the idea in 2018. So this has been a long time coming. Um,
Yay.
Even before I knew how to make graphics, before I knew anything about how I was actually going to make it happen, I had the idea for this book. It's hilarious, actually, because my first version was in like a Word document, and I had no idea how I was going to make it happen. Um,
I love
but
that.
I know it's great. It's fun to think about. But the reason why I had the idea was because I was hearing from so many parents who were burnt out and needing support, And there's only so much support that you can pay for most
Mm-hmm.
families.
Yep.
And so then it becomes, where else can you get support? What does the rest of your community look like? And other parents who are in the same boat are usually also needing support. And so you can't always rely on your peer community for that support, which is super challenging. And so where else can you go? We need to go, we need to go up or down, right? We need to go to the
Mm-hmm.
grandparents, or we need to go to people outside of the parenting years so that you can have that well-rounded support. And I was consistently hearing from parents, well, my parents live close by and I would love to get their support, but I don't feel comfortable because they might say something to my child about eating, or they might say something to my child about crying, or,
Mm-hmm.
tell my twins, well, if your brother hits you, just hit him back. And so there are all these generational ideas that parents are really protective about not passing along. And so
Yeah.
it was creating a big divide where, like you said, grandparents want to help, but they're not getting the access, and parents need the help, but they're not able to trust that help. So the logistical support is huge, but I think even more than that is the understanding and the respect and the non-judgment. Because
Mm-hmm.
even if you're not hands-on, grandparent that's picking up on a half snow day like we had last week, when everybody was scrambling to get their kids, then you still want to feel that your parenting choices are understood and that they're
Yes.
appreciated, and that you're not going to get a snide comment or a, a whatever. And that's really important because parents are working hard and they want to feel confident in what they're doing.
I mean, it makes a huge difference. So my parents live in Florida, and my husband's parents are in North Carolina. So we don't get the day-to-day
Sure.
logistical help at all. And so I'm envious of people who do. But gosh, like I mean, like I said, I have a really close relationship with my mom, so I always know she has my back. But like, you hear about that daughter-in-law, mother-in-law tension so much.
Hmm.
And I'm like, every single solitary time I have vented about something hard in parenting to my mother-in-law, she has always had my back and always had my husband's back and always been like, you guys are doing an amazing job. It's normal that it's hard. Hey, to my husband, your sister used to do that same exact thing. Do you remember? Because they're 8 years apart. So he
Oh,
does actually remember her, at similar ages. Um, and like just so affirming. And I'm just like, this is invaluable. Like, I can't imagine how much more stressful. I mean, I can imagine, I guess, how much more stressful it'd be if, like, she was like, you guys are doing it wrong, like all these other things. And I'm like, no, that is so valuable because parenting can be, it's really hard. Modern life can be really fast paced and unsupported. And like, if you don't have that from people who are supposed to, like,
yes,
yeah, just that affirmation that you're doing a good job. I respect and understand what you're doing. And, you know,
absolutely. Well, and you mentioned parenting children with neurodivergently wired brains. I
yeah.
think that is a extra tension in in families where there are, differently wired brains, because oftentimes what I hear is grandparents saying, well, they just need more discipline. You just
Mm-hmm.
need, more of these kind of old school techniques. And that's the problem. And we know that that's
Yes.
not going to help.
Yeah.
And so empowering families to have more understanding and more productive conversations about what children really need from a nervous system perspective.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I was talking with a friend, I guess it was a couple years ago, um, who got diagnosed with ADHD late in life,
Mm.
and she was like, "Why did no one tell me that?" Like, I explained all these symptoms. I was like, "Well, you're looking back. Do you remember our understanding of ADHD in the 90s? Like, especially as a girl. I mean, like, hello,
Right.
no, no way. Not get like it's just changed so much. We talk about the parenting paradigms and skills and strategies having changed, but like our understanding of neurodivergence has just transformed. Like, I mean, I was a kid in the 90s, so I only know like the kid version of what I understood of those things. So like totally different than like what my parents would probably say. But um, just even watching that space over the last 10 years,
Mm,
or so, it's so much has shifted or so much is more accessible. I don't know. It's just like that's just a whole nother layer, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I know a lot of the research really has given so much insight for parents about, here's how their child's brain works, but also especially with things that have a high heritability like ADHD,
Here's how your
how
spouse's or
how
your
their
brain
own
works.
brains work. Absolutely.
That's how I diagnosed my husband with ADHD. I was like, y'all have the exact same brain, except that you don't have, my husband doesn't have like the same level of energy, like the hyperactivity part. I was like, y'all have the
Uh-huh.
same exact brain. Like, absolutely. Exactly. So I don't care what anyone says. Like, I
Well,
I am the
and
diagnoser here. And he agrees with me. He agrees with me 100%. But yeah, totally the same.
well, and it makes a big difference when we have that understanding that we can see those patterns, we can see those needs through a different lens.
Hmm.
So, yes, it's so important for families to have that information.
So, do you cover in the book spanking? Because I always feel
Yes.
like spanking is totally gone out and like no one's doing it anymore. And then I stumble across something where people are actually still defending it. And I'm always like, OMG, like seriously. So is that one of the things that you touch on?
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, Kim. Thank you. Yes, I cover spanking, I cover yelling, I cover there's a few sections in the book. So one of the sections is called special topics. So those topics are in that section where we talk about the research, we talk about what's changed, we talk about why it's harmful, and we talk about what the alternatives are, what you can do instead of spanking, instead of yelling. I even have there's a section for FAQs, and so one of the questions is, what if, from a grandparent's perspective, right? What if one of my children choose to spank and the other doesn't? What should I do as a grandparent?
Oh, wow.
Um, absolutely,
Yes,
because
that's gonna happen.
because we know that spanking is certainly not as common as it was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, but it actually is still occurring in lots of families, across America. Truly, there really is sort of this slow movement away from spanking for a variety of reasons. And so that's, one of the reasons is because grandparents say, well, they should just have a spanking. You got spanked and
Mhm.
you turned out fine. So I wanted to absolutely tackle that question so that grandparents could start to have an understanding of why parents do want to move away from spanking and what parents are doing instead of spanking. That, parents aren't just saying, well, I don't care about behavior, destroy the house, do whatever you want. I want to be nice to you, so I'm never going to stop you. That's not what we're talking about at all. Which
Yeah.
is what people assume when you say, I'm not going to spank, or, I'm not going to use these punitive methods. They think, well, what are you going to do?
Right. You're gonna be super permissive and your kid's gonna be spoiled and have no sense of restraint or
Yes. So there's
yeah.
so there's a section that covers 7 really concrete tools that parents and grandparents can use to get through a variety of situations. And there's a whole section detailing how to use each of the tools in challenging situations, like eating, like sleeping, like whining, things that really tend to push family buttons.
Hmm.
So it's not just don't spank. I always care about skills and tools, Kim. So
Yes.
so I want to make sure that grandparents also have the information of what they can do instead.
I love that. So we're helping them shift the perspective. We're giving them the why, but then we're giving them the practical tools all kind of
Yes.
together. I love that. Sort of in wrapping up, because I feel like we could talk about this forever. As usual, I always feel like that way when we talk. But what would be kind of one takeaway for parents, since I assume, most of my listeners are the parents side of this, what would be one takeaway from the book to kind of round out our conversation that we haven't touched on as much?
Mm, that is a good question. Hmm.
Or even just something to like sort of re-highlight, even if we have touched on it, as far as like navigating this generational gap with our own parents.
I mean, I would say even though I wrote the book for grandparents and it really is, written to grandparents, all of the examples are about grandparenting. So it's not a traditional parenting book, but I would say
Hmm.
even though it is for grandparents, it's also a great resource for parents because, even if you think, well, I don't know if I can give this to my child's grandparent, or, I'm not going to give it to them because they might be mad. It's a good resource for parents to really clarify how they're thinking and how they're using these tools so that even without the book as a resource, obviously, I want everybody to use the resource because I think it has a lot of valuable information and it has all the worksheets and
Hmm.
practice sheets that really help you build the skills. But even if a grandparent never opens the book, it's still a really valuable tool for parents to use to bring up these topics and share
Yeah.
the information in a clear way with grandparents. They can talk
Yes.
about the skills in a really specific way instead of just saying, well, we like to support feelings and it's so important. It's okay to cry and you just support the feelings. That's not specific enough.
No,
So
that sounds so wishy-washy. Right. Like, I'm just thinking of the grandparent, like, what are you talking about, child? Like, you're crazy. What is this to be parenting?
exactly. Exactly. So parents can give some specific tips, some specific information, and even a few specific ways to use those tools. So they're not just saying, well, provide support, sit through the feelings. They can really say, here's how you can provide support when your grandchild is
Hmm.
crying. Here are three specific things that you can do to help your grandchild when they're crying.
Yeah.
So that way, the parents also feel empowered. The parents also feel confident and they can, really transmit that information, even just from their own modeling and communication.
I love that because I think as a parent, that clarity and explanation is hard. It is a barrier to explaining the way that you're doing things and just having that scaffolding, right? Ideally, we have it so both members are participating in reading the research and the tools, but just having that scaffolding, like this is a clear, concise, and factual explanation. Here is a specific tool. I mean
Yes.
that's really valuable. I mean, parents, we got a lot on our brains. We don't need to reinvent the wheel if someone else has already laid it out there. I mean,
Thank
like just
you.
to be honest, right?
Well,
Like,
yeah, absolutely. And that's why I wrote it to be a reference guide. It's you could really just flip to a page and say, okay, here's the question. Why is my grandchild whining? What do I do? Okay, here's the steps in order. Here's the scripts. Okay, that's it. Now I'm going to go do it. So, or if
love
you're
that.
having a follow-up conversation, here's what you can do. So you don't have to read cover to cover. Again, I hope everybody does read it cover to cover. But they're really it's designed to be a manual that is easy to use on hand in the busy life of, family day to day.
Yeah. I love that. So this podcast episode is going to come out on February 26th. I assume that's a Thursday. I think I have that date right.
Yes.
And your book is coming out right at the end of the month, right?
Correct. Yes. My launch party is on um, February 27th. So that's a Friday. And
Yes.
and then the book is coming out kind of officially launching on February 28th. And that's Saturday. So that's the last day of February. And then it will be widely available on Amazon and other bookstores. People obviously can still get it through my website or online, but then it will be widely available.
Awesome. So we'll link to the pre-order, and then I will try to remember to go in the first week in March and swap to like an actual purchasing link so folks can grab that and really use it as a tool.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was so great to chat with you about.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, like I remember you talking about this book a couple years ago. Like, so I was so excited. Yeah, like I literally saw it in a professional group, Sheena posting about it. I was like, wait, I remember you talking about this. Okay, podcast now. Like, so thank you so much for writing it and for, for coming to chat with me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode left you feeling more informed, confident, and encouraged on your sleep journey. And just a reminder before you go that nothing in this episode is individualized to your specific sleep situation, nor is it to be taken as medical advice. Take what resonates, ignore what doesn't, and check with your healthcare provider about any medical concerns. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll never miss an episode. And take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode you love on social media. All of that helps parents just like you find me, this podcast, and this gentle and responsive sleep information. I'll see you next time.